On the 9th day of Christmas, 9 ladies dancing. Who wants 9 ladies dancing? 9 ladies dancing and 10 drummers, 10 lords a-leaping and 11 pipers piping and 12 drummers drumming. It's a lot of noise and activity and raucous merriment. But this is the 9th day of Christmas. And as we gather here, as I started reading this gospel, I wanted to say, stop me if you've heard this one before. This is the 3rd time in a row that we've read this gospel from John. But John wants to remind us of something. We do only have a couple of days left in the season of Christmas. On Thursday, it will be the day of Epiphany, when we get to hear that story about the wise men coming to the manger in Bethlehem and the gifts and everything. But John wants us to know that Christmas isn't just a season, that Christmas is a way of life. Remember those those questions that you were supposed to ask if you were a journalist: when, where, why, what, whatever the other one is. I want to use 3 of those. In the old days, you see, preachers used to have a 3-point sermon. So I've been around long enough to have heard those 3-point sermons. And I think that John would invite us to consider 3 of those questions when it comes to Christmas. Where is the light, first of all? Impressive. There we go. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. I would suggest that John would invite us to consider who, where, and why. First, who? He's heard the story. This is a late gospel writing. So I'm sure that he's heard Luke's story about the travel to Bethlehem and the manger and the angels and the shepherds. He's heard that story. And no doubt he's heard the story of the wise men coming and Herod's crazy reaction and the slaughter of the innocents, a horrible story. He's heard all of these stories. And so have the people to whom he writes, his congregation. So he wants them to know what it's all about. What does it mean? What happened here? And so he begins in the beginning. When he does this, he draws people into that ancient story that they've heard since their birth. We've heard it as well, over and over again. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void. Darkness covered the face of the earth. And what is God's first word? Let there be light. Light. Can you imagine what happened at that moment? There's nothing but darkness. God says, let there be light. It wasn't just a little candle that came out. It was a big bang. And the heavens exploded. And the host of heaven marveled at what happened. So John draws us into that Old Testament picture of light shining in the darkness. And he says the Word was right there. And the Word was participating, was active, was the source of all this creation that took place. The Word was right there with God. In fact, the Word was God. Everything came into being through him. And he's light. He's light in the darkness. Let there be light. And the darkness, no matter how dark it was, could not overcome the brilliance of this light. And then he says, this one took on human flesh. This one became real, became a human being. It's John's gospel of the Christmas story. And the Word became flesh, dwelt among us, lived among us. And in this one, we have grace. John only uses that word grace. We use it all the time. The grace of the Lord be with you. But John only uses it 4 times. And it's all 4 times right here in what we call his prologue, his beginning of his gospel. This one is truth and grace. From him we have received grace upon grace. And this truth and grace has been showered upon us. You see, John makes the bold proclamation that when Jesus came into the world, that it was God incarnate, God in human flesh, God taking on all that we endure as human beings. Later on, Hebrews will say that he was tested in every way just as we are. In other words, he lived a real human life. But this one is God in the manger in Bethlehem. What a bold statement. Heresy, according to the religious leaders of the day. There can only be one God, and that God cannot possibly take on human flesh. And furthermore, that God can't possibly suffer and die. That would be heresy. But this is the proclamation. It's radical. It's frightening to the people. You know, God was always the one who could not be approached. When God appears to people, often described as an angel of God, when God appears, the first thing God has to say is, "Don't be afraid." When the people were traveling through the wilderness and they came to Mount Sinai, they couldn't even touch the mountain. And yet this God becomes a part of us, becomes human, approachable, intimate, in ways that God had never done before. That's who this one is that's born in the manger in Bethlehem. And where? Right in the midst of us. The language that says he lived among us or dwelt among us is translated by Eugene Peterson in the Message as he moved into the neighborhood. A wonderful image. In Jesus, God becomes present with us. The proclamation is that this one would be Emmanuel, God with us. Now that wasn't necessarily new. One of the translations of God living among us is that God tabernacled with the people. And that's exactly what happened as the people wandered in the wilderness too. God instructed them, build a tabernacle, put the Ark of the Covenant in there. That's the place where I'll meet you. It was a symbol that as the people journeyed through this strange land, this land that they didn't know anything about, that this God walked with them, led them, participated with them in their experiences, continued to instruct them, but also continued to guide them. God tabernacled with the people as they wandered through the wilderness. And so in John's prologue, again, he points us back to what God has done in the past. But this time it's not something that can only be approached by Moses or by some holy priest. All of a sudden, this one is in the midst of us in human form. And John will say what this one is like from now on in his gospel. He'll use all sorts of wonderful images. He's already used that image of light in the darkness. But now this one is also a shepherd, one who guides the people. He's right there with them, walking out in front of them, calling them to follow him. He's among the people. He gathers his disciples together to teach them regularly. He gathers the crowd together and feeds them right in their midst. This one who is the Word become flesh is not in some holy temple, but is right there in human form, in the midst of the people. When Jesus leaves, when he finally goes to the cross, he tells his disciples again and again, I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm going to gather with you by the gift of my Spirit. Matthew in the 18th chapter has Jesus saying that where two or three are gathered in my name, I'm there in the midst of them. That's words of hope and promise. Words that give us encouragement whenever we gather together like this. We've just now gathered in his name, and he proclaims that he gathers here with us, that he is in our midst. Often he comes to us in the form of other people sometimes we least expect. Often he comes to others in you as you share good news, a word of comfort, a word of hope or promise. Right in our midst, that's where he is. And finally, why? Why would this one do this? And again, John moves us into that understanding as well. To all who believe in this one, who receive him, because you see, there are a lot who don't. Want a wonderful word? When the Hebrew wrote that ancient text about the earth being formless and void, it's a wonderful word. It's tohu wabohu. Isn't that great? Tohu wabohu. Formless, a void. But later on, the rabbis used that same word, tohu wabohu, to talk about people who were astonished and bewildered and who were mentally formless and void. And John says that's what the world was like, again, when this light comes in. A bunch of tohu wabohus who couldn't see this light, who couldn't comprehend it, who couldn't understand it, but those who do, those who are grasped by this light are given power to become the children of God. This one has revealed God to us. That's comforting, isn't it? Luther once said, everything we can know about God we learn from Jesus. Not that we understand everything about God, but what we can know is what we learn from Jesus. And we learn that this one loves us so much that he's willing to die for us. We learn that this one wants to walk with us always through all the experiences of our life. We learn that this one gives us the power to be the children of God. And you know, that's what we're called to do all the time. We're called to go out and be the children of God, but that's not easy to do sometimes. We're called to love our neighbor, but we know our neighbors. It's not always easy to love those neighbors. And sometimes those neighbors don't look like us, don't act like us, don't believe like we do. Can you love them too? But you see, right at the beginning of John's gospel, he says, you don't do this on your own. This one gives us power to become those children of God daily. Remember how we began with that irritating hymn, Christmas Carol? As I was thinking about that 12 days of Christmas, I was reminded that I haven't heard it sung once this year. And I am not mourning that. That's fine. But do you know how many gifts there are in that? there are 364 gifts. Isn't that interesting? That means there are enough gifts that you could give one every day of the year until Christmas comes around again. And John is telling us this Christmas isn't just a season, it's a way of life. We live it all year long. But we only do that by the gift of this grace and truth, by the power of this word that comes to us. So as we enter this new year, as we look forward to 364 more days before we get to Christmas, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with this word that became flesh and dwells among us? Who gives us the power to be the children of God? Let me suggest something. Tomorrow morning when you get up and you got to go back to work again, and you walk in and you look at yourself in the mirror, what if you just said to yourself, I'm a child of God. I'm empowered by the Word made flesh. And God will shower His grace in me and through me. And then, what if the next day you did the same thing when you looked into the mirror? And then, of course, the third day, because it's become a habit now, you've been doing this all year, you did it again. A simple thing. See, this is the why. You are a child of God. You are dearly loved by this God who took on flesh. You are empowered by His Spirit. You are made new every day. And that's the good news of Christmas. And it's not just a season, it's a way of life. Amen.